On another occasion, the Venerable Bede wrote that during his own lifetime, one of the king's officers had led a dissolute life and on his deathbed lay refusing the last sacraments. As death approached, the king visited his friend, but on seeing him, the man cried out, "What do you want now? Why have you come here? There is nothing you can do to help or save me." The king said, "Don't talk like that. Stop acting like a madman." The man replied, "I am not mad, but I have the knowledge of my wickedness set clearly before my eyes." "What do you mean by that?" the king asked. And then the man said, "A short time ago, 2 very handsome youths entered this house and sat down beside me, one at my head and the other at my feet. One of them produced a tiny but very beautiful book and gave it to me to read. When I looked at it, I found all the good deeds that I had ever done recorded in it, but they were few and trifling. Then they took back the book, but said nothing to me. Suddenly there arrived a horde of evil spirits with repulsive faces who surrounded the house and occupied the greater part of it. Then one who, from the darkness of his face and exalted position, seemed to be their leader, produced a horrible-looking book of enormous size and almost unbearable weight, which he ordered one of his satellites to bring me to read. When I read it, I found all my crimes recorded there, not only sins of act and word, but even the least sin of thought. And then this evil spirit said to the glorious white-robed men who were sitting beside me, 'Why are you sitting here? You know very well that this man belongs to us.' And they replied, 'You are right. Take him and enroll him in the company of the damned.' And saying this, they disappeared. The dying man then said that these evil spirits were about to snatch his soul away and drag him down through the gates of hell. After this, he died in despair. The Venerable Bede then points out that if this man had bothered to correct the sins of his youth by well-doing, he could have been assigned a place in the company of the blessed, as it is written in Psalm 31, "Blessed are those whose sins are forgiven." And also, Bede says that what this man saw was not for his benefit, but for ours, so that we may remember that our actions and thoughts are not scattered like the wind, but are all preserved to be examined by the Supreme Judge. Our Lord said to us quite clearly that we will have to render an account for every idle word we speak on the day of judgment. And wouldn't it be utter madness to ignore such a warning? Here are 2 more examples of souls deceived by Satan. Malachi Martin, in his book Hostage to the Devil, tells of a young padre in World War II who, while in Burma, went to talk to a Japanese prisoner of war who was dying, to find out if he were a Catholic, and if he were, to give him the last sacraments. As he approached the prisoner, the priest, wearing battle fatigues and nothing to distinguish him from any other military person, saw the Japanese man regard him with a look not of fear nor of hate, but of some incomprehensible animal-like defiance. The man's body began to shake as the priest drew near to him, and his face became horribly distorted. The priest then took out his crucifix and held it up before the man's eyes. Strange guttural sounds immediately began to well up from the man's throat, and one of the intelligence officers at the priest's side exclaimed, "Good Lord, Padre, he's cursing your cross." "Ask him why he's cursing the cross," the priest said, and at the same time he felt as if some preternatural intelligence were answering him, saying, "Get out of here. Take yourself and your cross away from this man. You serve the one we hate. Get out of here." The intelligence officer put the question to the dying man, and the latter instantaneously started to rise up from his couch, lifted his hands up and began to tear at the bandage covering his chest wounds, and then, shouting out the word "Himiko! Himiko!" through convulsed and contorted lips, he fell back dead onto his bed of leaves. The priest later discovered that Himiko was the spirit queen of a cult group who worshipped her as a goddess, and her seat of power was in the mountains behind Kyoto, which is the location of many such shrines dedicated to the worship of spirits who in reality hate Christ and everything that he stands for, and whose adepts, therefore, are in some way consecrated to Satan. My second example concerns Concetto Marchese, who was once the rector magnificus of the University of Padua in northern Italy. He was a famous academic and at the same time a communist who lived far from God. When he lay dying, one of the sisters in the clinic where he was spoke to him frankly and said, "Sir, heart attack means danger of death. If you like, I will tell the chaplain and he'll help you to put your conscience in order." "The priest," stuttered Concetto, in a weak voice, "to give me absolution? I have sinned too much. I always believed in the existence of God. I could not deny that. But nevertheless I always sinned, abusing God's mercy. Now I am unworthy of his pardon. I don't deserve mercy." Saying this, Concetto turned his head away. A few seconds later he was dead. Satan in fact had reigned for so many years in that poor man's soul that at the moment of death he had led him to commit one of the greatest of sins, that of despair, by which a person believes that there is no hope left, that his or her sins are greater than God's mercy, which is of course the most abominable of lies. As life on this earth comes to an end, man loses the use of his free will, and is given no more time to merit for good. Those who die in hatred are chained up in the bonds of hatred forever by divine justice, whereas those who die in love will dwell eternally in that love. Their wills so united to our Lord's, as he himself told St. Catherine of Siena, that even were one to see one's father or mother in hell, one would still be without sorrow, and even content to see the damned in hell, for they are Christ's enemies. Unable to die as they would wish, the damned can never lose the natural being of their soul, although they have lost forever that being which had been given to them by God's grace, and which they had willfully rejected. Finally, we are going to look at hell through the eyes of Saint Francesca of Rome, who in the first half of the 15th century was shown the damned by God, being tortured by the devils with various instruments, which she was specifically told by an angel do not exist in hell, but which were shown to her in that way so that she might better understand what she saw. St. Francis, in the deepest part of hell, saw the souls of those wretched men and women who were guilty of the sin of sodomy and of other sins against nature. The devils tortured them in the same way that they had committed this repulsive vice with others. So they were pierced through from one end of their body to the other on spits, and then their flesh was torn with fiery hooks while they were continually pierced through with the spits, which the devils extracted from the mouths of the damned and reinserted them again in their back passages, and this without pause or cessation for all eternity. St. Bridget of Sweden said that the demon which excites man to unnatural intercourse with man is worse than all the other demons. In the deepest section of hell, St. Francis was also shown the souls of usurers, nailed to a fiery table with their arms outstretched, but not in the form of a cross, for such an image is not to be seen anywhere in hell. The devils, with things that looked like riddles in their hands, poured liquefied gold and silver into the mouths of each soul, and into a hole above each soul's heart, saying, "O wretched soul, remember your life." And then they throw these souls into a tub full of boiling gold and silver, in which torment they remained, cursing and shouting with rage. Still in the lowest part of hell, St. Francis saw the souls of blasphemers. The devils extract the tongue of each soul with fiery tongs, place the tongue on burning coals, and then take the coals and push them down the throat of each soul, after which they throw the souls into tubs of boiling oil, and the boiling oil is poured down each soul's throat, while the devil said, "Why did you curse?" At which the soul cursed and blasphemed even more. Traitors had their hearts torn out, while the devils cried out, "O false traitor, why were you unfaithful to the promise you made at baptism to renounce Satan?" All these pains, the angel explained to St. Francis, were suffered as if what she saw were taking place, and after the last judgment, the soul would suffer the same pains with its body as well. The next group were the souls of murderers. The devils took hold of these souls with a special rage, throwing them into receptacles filled with boiling blood and into others full of ice, striking them all the while on their hearts and on their tongues with fiery instruments. Among the murderers, St. Francis saw the souls of those women who had killed their children either after conception or after birth. The souls of apostates were sawn asunder with fiery saws, onto which fell liquefied lead. The souls of men and women who had been excommunicated because of their crimes were thrown into the very deepest part of hell, which was full of liquefied pitch, sulphur, oil, and iron together. The devils shouted at them, "O suffering souls who allowed yourself to be deceived by your lust and sensuality, and who threw yourselves into the fire with your mortal sins, you did not fear excommunication, and now you are suffering this bitter pain." The souls of the proud each suffered differently depending on the gravity and circumstance of their sins, but they were all thrown into a burning bronze idol which was filled with extremely sharp razors, and later were pulled out by other devils armed with hooks. Again, this punishment never ceased for a second. The souls of the angry were also torn to pieces with fiery hooks. The avaricious were tormented by serpents and then tossed about like a rag by the devils, and scraped with fiery combs in the most sensitive parts of their body. Misers St. Francis saw sitting on the fire and covered in flames. Each one had a worm that tormented his heart, and was tortured by the devils in various ways, and continually enveloped in excrement. The gluttonous were also in the lowest part of hell, dragged on burning coals, and they had to drink a burning wine filled with serpents. And for every variation of sin in this and in the other categories, there was a different pain, many souls being tied to a burning pole and beaten by devils. Others were nailed by their heads to a plank. Those souls who had given their daughters up to a life of impurity were placed on a burning brazier, and then in an enormous bell. 4 devils then, in the form of enraged dogs, tore them to shreds, threw them about and rolled them in excrement. Those who had lived in hatred sat on the fire, and were torn apart by the devils with burning combs. Calumniators had their tongues torn out, were blinded, and then had their brains squeezed out, while the devils reproved them, shouting, "O disconsolate souls, you allowed yourselves to be blinded by your sensuality. You turned lies into truths, to calumniate souls, and so you are thrown into fire and visited by demons." Gamblers were enveloped in a mixture of broken bones and burning coals, and had fiery darts stuck into their hands and throats. Thieves were hung up, while other criminals had their heads cut off, and the devils shouted, "O evil souls, you destroyed your goodness, and gave us victory. Now we hold you in our power, and we will torment you today and forever, and you will never be free." Those who had sinned through lust were tortured by devils in the form of serpents, who bit them in their private parts in which they had experienced unlawful delights. St. Francis saw doctors who had practiced abortion squeezed between burning plates, hung upside down and torn with hooks. Now next time we see the rich enjoying the pleasures of this world, seemingly with peaceful consciences despite their irreligious lives, next time we see those unrepentant homosexuals or satanic feminists shrieking that they have a right to unnatural intercourse or to kill the children in their wombs, next time we see the grinning features of the rich and famous whose adulteries are always in the headlines, or those who achieve fame by tormenting, corrupting, or killing others, or actors and actresses who publicly outrage our Lord and His Holy Mother, when we see these and all the other mortal sins which today are so boasted about on men's lips, then let us shudder as we remember the unending torture which the transitory joys of sin buy for those who insist on renouncing Christ in favor of unlawful pleasures.